Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Clean Life. Louis Kane adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of the Chicago hotel, studying the face that had once struck fear into the hearts of loan sharks and rival family soldiers. 15 years of legitimate business had softened the hard edges, but the steel-gray eyes remained unchanged, calculating, observant, dangerous when needed. At 45, Louis ran 3 successful auto repair shops across the South Side. His hands, once used for breaking bones and sending messages, now diagnosed engine troubles and balance books. The transformation hadn't been easy. After his daughter Emma was born 20 years ago, Louis made a choice that few in his position survived. He walked away from the Torino family. Vincent Torino himself had given Louis the blessing, partly out of respect for Louis's unwavering loyalty, partly because Louis knew enough secrets to bring down half the organization. "You earned your freedom, Louis," Vincent had said during their final meeting. "But remember, the life never really leaves you. It just sleeps." Louis packed his overnight bag, thinking about Emma. At 19, she was everything he'd hoped for: smart, kind, studying pre-med at Northwestern. His wife Maxine had been supportive during his transition, or so he thought. They'd met during his final year with the family, when she was working as a nurse. She'd seemed to understand his need to change, to build something legitimate for their daughter. The Denver parts supplier meeting had gone well. Louis had secured exclusive distribution rights for performance parts that would boost all 3 shops' profits significantly. He'd planned to stay another day, but something gnawed at him, a feeling he'd learned never to ignore during his enforcer days. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Emma, all from yesterday. That was unusual. Emma typically texted rather than called, and she never called repeatedly without leaving messages. Louis tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. The unease that had saved his life countless times in the old days whispered warnings. Louis changed his flight, arriving at O'Hare 6 hours earlier than planned. During the taxi ride home, he called Maxine. "Louis, you're not supposed to be back until tomorrow." Her voice carried an odd tension. Meeting ended early. "Is Emma okay? She called 3 times yesterday." A pause. She's fine. Just stressed about finals. I tried calling her back. Phone's going to voicemail. You know how college kids are with their phones. "Look, I'm out running errands. See you when you get home." The line went dead. In 15 years of marriage, Maxine had never hung up without saying goodbye. Louis leaned forward. "Driver, step on it." Chapter 2. The Monster Stirs. Louis paid the taxi driver and approached his house on Maple Street quietly, the way Vincent Torino had taught him to approach any situation where things felt wrong. The neighborhood was affluent but not ostentatious, the perfect cover for a man trying to disappear from his past. A black Crown Victoria sat in his driveway, standard issue for Chicago PD detectives. Louis didn't recognize it. He moved to the side of the house, using the landscaping for cover, and peered through the living room window. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Emma sat in a chair, her left arm twisted behind her back at an unnatural angle. Tears streamed down her face, but she hadn't broken. Louis recognized the stubborn set of her jaw, inherited from him. A man in a rumpled suit held her arm, his badge visible on his belt. Detective Curtis Harrison, according to the nameplate. Maxine stood nearby, arms crossed, wearing an expression Louis had never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost predatory. "Tell us where his hidden money is." Curtis snarled, applying more pressure to Emma's arm. She gasped but remained silent. Maxine laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Your daddy's gone, sweetie. He can't help you now, but you can help yourself by being smart." "I don't know what you're talking about," Emma whispered. "Dad runs auto shops. He doesn't have hidden money." Curtis backhanded her, the crack echoing through the room. "Don't lie to us. 15 years with the Torino family, and you expect us to believe he didn't squirrel away a fortune?" Louis's vision tunneled. The careful control he'd maintained for 15 years began to crack. His daughter, his innocent daughter, was being tortured by his own wife and a corrupt cop who clearly knew about his past. He moved to the front door, using his key as quietly as possible. The old skills returned like muscle memory, silent movement, controlled breathing, tactical assessment. Curtis was armed but careless, focused on Emma. Maxine was a civilian, no threat beyond betrayal. Lewis stepped into the hallway, directly in Curtis's line of sight. The detective's face went white as their eyes met. "He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow," Curtis whispered. Lewis's voice came out in a tone he hadn't used in 15 years. Soft, controlled, absolutely terrifying. "Let go of my daughter." The monster that Louis Kane had buried beneath business suits and tax returns stirred in its grave. And it was very, very hungry. Chapter 3. The Price of Betrayal. Curtis's hand moved toward his service weapon, but Lewis was already moving. 15 years of legitimate life hadn't dulled the reflexes honed in Torino family wars. Lewis crossed the room in 3 steps, catching Curtis's wrist as the gun cleared its holster. The snap of breaking bone was audible. Curtis screamed and dropped the weapon. Lewis caught it mid-fall, ejected the magazine, and cleared the chamber with professional efficiency. The bullets scattered across the hardwood floor like deadly confetti. "Emma, go to your room," Lewis said without taking his eyes off Curtis, who was cradling his shattered wrist. "Dad, now." Emma fled upstairs. Lewis heard her bedroom door slam, then the click of the lock. Smart girl. He turned his attention to his wife of 15 years. 20 years, Lewis said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. 20 years I've been out of the life. Built something legitimate, something clean. And you? He shook his head. You've been what exactly? Feeding information to this piece of garbage about my past. Maxine's mask had slipped completely. The loving wife and mother was gone, replaced by something calculating and cold. You think I didn't know who you really were? The nurses at Chicago General talk, Lewis. I knew about Vincent Torino, about the bodies, about the money you must have hidden. There is no hidden money, Lewis said. Every penny I made after leaving the life came from honest work. Curtis struggled to his feet, still clutching his wrist. Bullshit. 15 years with the Torinos? You had to have skimmed millions. Lewis studied the corrupt detective. Curtis Harrison. He'd heard that name somewhere. Then it clicked. Harrison. Your father was Mickey Harrison. Work collections for Sal Benedetto. Curtis's good hand clenched into a fist. That old bastard die broke because of your boss. Torino muscled in on Benedetto's territory, killed the business. My father drank himself to death. And you became a cop to what? Get revenge? How's that working out for you, Curtis? Better than you think. Curtis smiled despite his obvious pain. I've been building a case against Vincent Torino for 3 years. But I needed someone on the inside, someone who knew the family secrets. So you seduced my wife. I recruited her, Curtis corrected. Maxine's been very helpful. She's been searching this house for months, looking for account numbers, safe deposit box keys, anything that would lead us to your nest egg. Lewis looked at Maxine with genuine curiosity. How long? 2 years, she admitted. Curtis approached me after you had that hard episode. Said if something happened to you, Emma and I would be left with nothing while the government seized assets they couldn't prove were illegitimate. And you believed him. I knew you, Lewis. Really knew you. The way you never talked about your past. The way you'd go silent when certain names came up on the news. I knew there had to be money hidden somewhere. Lewis walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and pulled out a beer. He popped it open and took a long drink while Curtis and Maxine watched nervously. When he finished, he set the bottle down and smiled. Not the warm smile Emma knew, but something altogether more dangerous. Here's what's going to happen, Lewis said. Curtis, you're going to explain exactly what kind of case you think you're building. Maxine, you're going to tell me everything you shared with him. And then, he paused, the smile widening. Then I'm going to remind both of you why Vincent Torino's top enforcer retired undefeated. The monster was fully awake now, and it had been sleeping for far too long. Chapter 4. The Investigation. 3 hours later, Lewis had learned everything. Curtis had spread police reports, photographs, and manila folders across the dining room table like a man planning a military campaign. His broken wrist was secured in a makeshift sling, but his eyes held the fervor of true believer. Vincent Torino's been untouchable for 20 years, Curtis explained, his voice tight with pain and obsession. Every time we get close, witnesses disappear or change their stories. Evidence goes missing. Judges get transferred. But you, he pointed at Lewis with his good hand. You were there for everything. The Benedetto War, the dock worker strikes, the casino skimming operation. Lewis studied the files. Crime scene photos from hits he'd never seen before, surveillance photos of Vincent from the past decade, financial records that Curtis had clearly obtained through illegal means. You think I'm going to help you build a case against Vincent? I think you're going to help me whether you want to or not, Curtis replied, because I've got enough on you right now to put you away for life. Statute of limitations doesn't apply to murder, Lewis. Maxine sat silently in the corner, no longer the woman Lewis had thought he knew. She'd been documenting his habits, photographing papers, even recording conversations. Her betrayal ran deeper than simple greed. It was systematic, professional. Show me what you think you have on me, Lewis said. Curtis opened a thick folder. Inside were photos of Lewis from his Torino days, FBI surveillance shots, witness statements from people Lewis had never met claiming to have seen him at various crime scenes. The problem with cold cases, Lewis mused, flipping through the fabricated evidence, is that memories get fuzzy. People remember things that never happened. Evidence gets creative. These witnesses are solid. These witnesses are lying. Lewis held up a photo allegedly showing him outside a warehouse where a rival family soldier had been found dead. I was in Miami that week, visiting my sick aunt. Got receipts, hotel records, even a speeding ticket from the Florida State Police. You want to explain how I was in two places at once? Curtis's confidence wavered slightly. One case doesn't. It's not one case. It's all of them. Lewis spread the photos across the table. See, Curtis, you made the same mistake every amateur makes when trying to frame someone. You assumed that because I was Vincent's enforcer, I must have been involved in every piece of Torino business. But that's not how it worked. Lewis stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where he'd tried to build a normal life. Vincent used me for specific jobs. Clean work, professional work, the kind that never left evidence because it never looked like murder in the first place. Heart attacks, car accidents, drug overdoses, all perfectly explainable. He turned back to Curtis. The bodies you're trying to pin on me, those were somebody else's mess. Sloppy work by soldiers who wanted to send a message instead of solve a problem. You're lying. I'm telling you that your case is garbage. But here's what really interests me. How did you know to approach Maxine? How did you know I existed at all? Curtis glanced at Maxine, who looked away. Lewis caught the exchange. Ah, Lewis said softly. Someone told you about me. Someone who knew I was out here, living clean, vulnerable to exactly this kind of pressure. It doesn't matter how. It matters to me. Lewis's voice dropped to the tone that had once made grown men confess their sins. Because whoever gave you my name knew it would put Emma in danger. And that person is going to pay for it. Lewis pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 5 years. Vincent, it's Lewis. We need to talk. Chapter 5, Old Debts and New Enemies. Vincent Torino looked exactly as Lewis remembered, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. They met at Rossetti's, an Italian restaurant that Vincent had owned for 30 years through a complex web of shell companies. You look good, Lewis, Vincent said, cutting into his veal. Suburban life agrees with you. Someone's been asking questions about my past, using my family to get to me. Vincent's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Explain. Lewis laid out the situation, Curtis's investigation, Maxine's betrayal, the fabricated evidence. Vincent listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. Curtis Harrison, Vincent said finally. Mickey Harrison's boy. Mickey was small-time, worked for Sal Benedetto before Sal got stupid and tried to muscle in on my territory. Curtis seems to think you killed his father. Mickey Harrison killed himself with a bottle of whiskey and a lifetime of bad choices. But sons need someone to blame. Vincent dabbed his mouth with a napkin. What's your play here, Lewis? I need to know who gave Curtis my information. Someone in your organization told him where to find me. Vincent's eyes hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's the only explanation. Curtis knew too much about my specific role with you. He knew I was your enforcer, not just a soldier. He knew about jobs that never made the papers. Someone with inside knowledge sold me out. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, considering. I'll make inquiries. But Lewis, if someone in my family betrayed you, they betrayed me too. This Curtis Harrison, he's not just coming after you. He's using you to get to me. I figured. So what are you going to do about it? Lewis smiled, and Vincent recognized the expression from 20 years ago. I'm going to remind people why you trusted me with the difficult problems. You're retired, Lewis. You got a good life now. They threatened Emma. They put their hands on my daughter. Lewis's voice was steady, but Vincent could hear the controlled fury beneath. Retirement's over. Vincent nodded slowly. What do you need? Information, resources, and most importantly, plausible deniability. Whatever happens to Curtis Harrison and whoever betrayed me, it can't come back on you. Understood. But Lewis, be careful. 15 years is a long time to be out of the game. Things have changed. The old rules don't always apply. Some rules never change, Lewis replied. Cross the wrong man's family, and you pay the price. After leaving the restaurant, Lewis drove to his old neighborhood, a part of Chicago he hadn't visited in over a decade. The streets were cleaner now, gentrification pushing out the rough edges that had once defined the area. But some things remained the same. Buddy Stewart ran a pawn shop on Western Avenue, the kind of place that sold more than jewelry and electronics. Lewis found him in the back office, counting money with the methodical precision of a man who understood the value of both legitimate and illegitimate currency. Jesus Christ, Buddy said, looking up. Lewis Kane. Thought you were dead. Just sleeping. I need a favor, Buddy. You know I don't do that kind of work anymore. This isn't work. This is a friend asking for help. Lewis sat down across from Buddy's desk. Someone's threatening my family. I need to know who. And I need to know tonight. Buddy studied Lewis's face, seeing something there that made him reach for a secure phone. What do you need? Curtis Harrison, Chicago PD detective. I need everything. Finances, personal life, who he talks to, where he goes when he's not being a cop. And I need to know if anyone's been asking questions about me in the past year. This is going to cost. Vincent's backing it. Send him the bill. Buddy's eyebrows rose. Vincent Torino's backing it? Jesus, Lewis, what kind of mess are you in? The kind that gets cleaned up permanently, Lewis replied. How long? Give me 12 hours. I'll have everything you need to know about Curtis Harrison, and then some. Lewis stood to leave, then turned back. Buddy, keep this between us for now. I don't know who I can trust in Vincent's organization. You think someone in the family sold you out? I know someone did. And when I find out who, they're going to wish Curtis Harrison had never been born. Chapter 6, The Web Titans. The next morning brought information that changed everything. Buddy's report sat on Lewis's kitchen table like a bomb waiting to explode. Curtis Harrison wasn't just a corrupt cop seeking revenge. He was part of something much larger and more dangerous. Emma sat across from Lewis, her arm in a sling, but her eyes clear and determined. Dad, I want to know what's really going on. Lewis had spent the night considering how much to tell his daughter. She was 19, old enough to understand the truth, and she'd already been pulled into this mess against her will. Your mother and I are getting divorced, he said simply. She's been working with a corrupt police detective to steal from our family. When you wouldn't give them information you didn't have, they hurt you. Emma nodded slowly. The man who broke my arm. He kept asking about money you supposedly hid. But Dad, you don't hide money. You pay taxes on everything. I help with the books at the shops. Smart girl. What else did they say while I was gone? Mom kept talking about how we deserve better, how you've been holding out on us for years. She seemed to know things about your past that I didn't. Something about you working for dangerous people before I was born. Lewis sighed. I did work for dangerous people. I was what they called an enforcer. I solved problems that couldn't be solved legally. But that was 20 years ago, before you were born. I left that life to give you something better. And now it's catching up with us. Now someone's using it to hurt my family. Which means I have to deal with it the way I used to deal with problems. Emma was quiet for a moment. Are you going to kill them? The directness of the question caught Lewis off guard. His daughter had inherited his intelligence along with his stubborn streak. I'm going to make sure they can never hurt you again, he said carefully. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. Emma stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she'd grown up feeling safe. Mom's gone, isn't she? She's not coming back. No, sweetheart. She's not. Good, Emma said firmly. After what she did to you, to us, I don't want her back. Louis felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Emma was strong, but he didn't want this situation to harden her the way his own experiences had hardened him. His phone buzzed with a text from Buddy. New information. Meet me at the shop. Emma, I need you to stay with your Aunt Sarah for a few days. Dad, this isn't negotiable. What's coming next? You don't want to be anywhere near it. An hour later, Louis sat in Buddy's office, staring at photographs that made his blood run cold. Curtis Harrison meeting with federal agents. Curtis Harrison accepting envelopes of cash from men Louis didn't recognize. And most damning of all, Curtis Harrison in deep conversation with Randolph Warren. Randy Warren, Louis said softly. That son of a bitch. You know him. He was Vincent's accountant. Handled all the legitimate business fronts, investment strategies, tax shelters. If anyone would know about hidden money, it would be Randy. Gets better, Buddy said, sliding another photo across the desk. Warren's been meeting with FBI Organized Crime Task Force for 6 months. Your wife's been photographing documents from your house and passing them to Harrison, who passes them to Warren, who passes them to the feds. Louis studied the surveillance photos. They're not just after me. They're building a RICO case against Vincent, and they think I'm the key witness who's going to flip. Are you? I'm the key witness who's going to disappear, Louis corrected, along with everyone who thought they could use my family to get to me. Louis, be smart about this. Harrison's a cop. Warren's protected by the feds. I can't just what? Louis's voice carried the old edge. They torture my daughter, Buddy. They turn my wife against me, use her to spy on my family for 2 years. You think I'm going to let that slide because Harrison carries a badge? Buddy held up his hands. I'm just saying, plan it right. The old days of making people disappear are over. Everything's connected now. Everything's recorded. Good thing I learned from the best, Louis replied. Vincent taught me that the best solutions are the ones that look like accidents. Louis gathered the photos and documents. I need one more thing, Buddy. I need to know where Curtis Harrison feels safest, where he goes to meet his federal contacts. And I need Randy Warren's daily routine. Louis, this ends in the next 48 hours, one way or another. Either I solve this problem, or Emma and I spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Buddy sighed and reached for his phone. I'll have what you need by tonight. But Louis, whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it afterward. I've been living with worse for 20 years, Louis replied. Time to balance the books. Chapter 7. The Perfect Storm. Curtis Harrison felt secure in the FBI field office on West Roosevelt Road. Federal protection, professional colleagues, and the satisfaction of finally bringing down the Torino organization made him almost giddy as he handed over the latest batch of documents Maxine had photographed. This is beautiful work, Detective, Agent Sidney Daly said, examining bank records from Louis's legitimate businesses. With Kane's cooperation, we can map the entire Torino financial network. What if he doesn't cooperate? Curtis asked. Oh, he'll cooperate. Agent Daly smiled. Once we explain that his daughter could be charged as an accessory if we find any family assets that can't be explained through legitimate income. Curtis nodded, but something nagged at him. Louis Kane hadn't seemed like a man who would break easily, even under threat to his family. There had been something in his eyes, something cold and calculating that reminded Curtis uncomfortably of his father's stories about the old days. Across town, Randolph Warren sat in his Lincoln Park office, reviewing financial records that would soon destroy his former employer. Randy had been Vincent Torino's accountant for 15 years before the FBI approached him with evidence of tax evasion that would have sent him to federal prison for decades. The deal had been simple: complete cooperation in exchange for immunity and witness protection. Randy would provide financial records, identify money laundering operations, and help the FBI understand how the Torino organization had evolved from street-level crime to sophisticated white-collar operations. The key had been Louis Kane. As Vincent's former enforcer, Louis would know where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Getting him to flip would provide the testimony needed to dismantle the entire organization. Randy's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Warren. Hello, Randy. It's Louis Kane. Randy's blood turned to ice. Louis. I heard you were back in touch with Vincent. I am. We've been discussing old times, old friendships, old betrayals. Your name came up quite a bit. Louis, I can explain. I'm sure you can. In fact, I'd like to hear that explanation in person. Are you free this evening? Randy looked around his office, suddenly aware of how isolated he was. I don't think that's a good idea. I wasn't asking, Randy. Rossetti's restaurant, 8 o'clock. Come alone, and come prepared to explain why you thought it was acceptable to use my family to build your federal case. Louis, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. 8 o'clock, Randy. Don't disappoint me. The line went dead. Randy stared at the phone, his hands shaking. He reached for his secure line to call Agent Daly, then stopped. If Louis knew about the federal cooperation, he might know about other things too. Randy had been skimming from Vincent's accounts for years, small amounts that he'd assumed would never be noticed. But Louis Kane had been Vincent's enforcer. He'd been the one who tracked down problems and solved them permanently. Randy grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He needed protection, and he needed it immediately. Meanwhile, Louis sat in his car outside Maxine's sister's apartment, watching his soon-to-be ex-wife through the window. She was on the phone, gesturing animatedly, probably talking to Curtis about their next move. Louis's phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Randy Warren never showed for your meeting. Curtis Harrison called in sick today. They're running scared. Louis smiled and typed back. Good. Scared people make mistakes. His phone rang immediately. Vincent's voice was tense. Louis, my people are hearing chatter. FBI's putting together an operation. They think you're going to try something. They're right. This is dangerous ground. You sure about this play? Vincent, in 15 years of working for you, did I ever leave loose ends? A pause. No, you never did. Then trust me one more time. By tomorrow night, Curtis Harrison, Randy Warren, and Maxine will no longer be problems for either of us. How? The same way I always solve problems. I'm going to give them exactly what they want and let their own greed destroy them. Louis hung up and dialed another number. When Curtis Harrison answered, his voice was strained and nervous. Harrison. Curtis, it's Louis. We need to talk. I'm not. You're not what? Not interested in Vincent Torino's real financial records? Not interested in learning where he actually keeps the money you think I've been hiding? Curtis was quiet for a long moment. You're willing to deal? I'm willing to end this. One way or another. Tomorrow night, Millennium Park by the Bean. Come alone, bring Maxine, and I'll give you everything you need to put Vincent away forever. How do I know this isn't a trap? Because if I wanted you dead, Curtis, you'd already be dead. This is business. Clean business. Louis ended the call and smiled. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was spring it. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The next evening, Louis arrived at Millennium Park an hour early. The area around Cloud Gate, the massive reflective sculpture locals called the Bean, was busy with tourists and evening joggers. Perfect cover for what was about to happen. Louis had chosen the location carefully. Multiple escape routes, good sight lines, and enough ambient noise to mask conversation. Most importantly, it was the kind of public place where people expected to see federal agents and police officers. Curtis Harrison and Maxine arrived precisely on time, both looking nervous but determined. Curtis carried a briefcase that undoubtedly contained recording equipment. Maxine clutched a purse that probably held a camera or phone for documenting whatever Louis was about to show them. Louis, Maxine said as they approached. Her voice carried none of the warmth he'd heard for 15 years. Maxine, Curtis. Louis nodded to both of them. I assume you're recording this conversation. We are, Curtis admitted. For our own protection. Smart. So, am I. Louis held up a small digital recorder. For posterity. Curtis looked around nervously. Where are the documents you promised? Safe deposit box, obviously. But before we go there, I want to make sure we understand each other. Louis sat down on a nearby bench, forcing them to join him or stand awkwardly. They chose to sit. I'm going to give you everything you want, Lewis continued. Vincent's real financial records, account numbers, investment portfolios, even the location of safety deposit boxes in 3 different countries. Enough evidence to convict him of tax evasion, money laundering, and RICO violations. Curtis leaned forward eagerly. In exchange for what? Complete immunity for me and Emma. New identities if necessary. And a guarantee that Maxine disappears from our lives forever. That can be arranged, Curtis said quickly. Good. But first, I need to know something. Randy Warren, where is he? Curtis and Maxine exchanged glances. He's in protective custody, Curtis admitted. Federal safe house. Interesting, because Randy called me 3 hours ago, begging for a meeting. Seems he's terrified that Vincent found out about his cooperation with the FBI. Curtis frowned. That's impossible. Warren's been secured since yesterday. Lewis smiled. Has he? Curtis, what exactly did Randy Warren tell you about Vincent's finances? Everything. Account numbers, transaction records, shell company structures. All false. Lewis interrupted. Randy Warren has been feeding you fabricated evidence for months. The real financial records are completely different, and the money Vincent actually has hidden is in places Randy never knew about. Curtis stared at Lewis, comprehension dawning slowly. You're saying Warren played us? I'm saying Randy Warren is smarter than you gave him credit for. He's been using your investigation to eliminate evidence of his own embezzlement from Vincent's accounts. Every document he gave you was designed to misdirect federal investigators away from the money he's been stealing. Maxine spoke for the first time. Lewis, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you've been working for the wrong side, Maxine. Randy Warren identified me as a threat because I'm one of the few people who knew about the real financial arrangements. He convinced Curtis to pressure me through you, hoping I'd either flip on Vincent or disappear entirely. Lewis stood up, his voice growing colder. But Randy made one crucial mistake. He forgot that Vincent Torino's enforcer doesn't just solve problems, he prevents them. Curtis reached for his service weapon, but Lewis was already moving. Not to attack, but to step back and raise his hands visibly. Easy, Curtis. Look around. Notice anything interesting about our fellow park visitors? Curtis glanced around and saw what Lewis meant. At least 6 people in the immediate area were too alert, too well-positioned, too professional to be casual tourists. FBI, Lewis said pleasantly. Agent Sidney Daly and his task force. They've been watching this meeting from the beginning, recording everything we've said. Curtis's face went pale. You set us up. I did. See, when I called you yesterday, I also called Agent Daly. Told him that Vincent Torino's accountant and a corrupt Chicago police detective were planning to eliminate a federal witness, me. Provided him with evidence of your illegal surveillance of my home, your assault on Emma, and your conspiracy with Randy Warren to manufacture evidence. Lewis pulled out his phone and played a recording of Curtis's voice. These witnesses are solid. I've been building a case against Vincent Torino for 3 years. I recruited her. Maxine's been very helpful. Everything you said in my house 2 nights ago was recorded, Curtis, including your admission that you've been using Maxine to conduct illegal searches of my property. Curtis stood abruptly, his hand on his weapon. You bastard. You're still working for Torino. No, Curtis. I'm working for my family. There's a difference. Agent Daly emerged from behind a nearby tree, flanked by 4 other agents. Detective Harrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, civil rights violations, and abuse of authority. As Curtis was handcuffed, he stared at Lewis with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Lewis replied. Randy Warren was arrested 6 hours ago, trying to board a plane to the Cayman Islands with $8 million in cash. Turns out embezzling from Vincent Torino was even stupider than trying to frame me. Lewis turned to Maxine, who stood frozen in shock. As for you, our marriage is over, obviously. You'll be charged as an accessory to Curtis's crimes, but I imagine you'll get a plea deal if you cooperate fully. Lewis, you put our daughter in danger, Maxine. You brought criminals into our home and helped them torture Emma for information that didn't exist. There's nothing you can say that I want to hear. Agent Daly approached Lewis as Curtis and Maxine were led away. Mr. Kane, we'll need a full statement about Detective Harrison's activities. Of course. But Agent Daly, I want it clear that my cooperation ends with Curtis Harrison and Randy Warren. I have no information about current Torino family activities, and I haven't had contact with Vincent Torino in over 15 years. Agent Daly nodded. Understood. Your cooperation tonight will be noted in our reports. As the federal agents dispersed and the park returned to normal, Lewis sat back down on the bench and pulled out his phone. Vincent, it's done. Harrison and Warren are in custody. The federal case against you dies with them. Any loose ends? None. Randy's embezzlement will keep federal investigators busy for months, and everything Curtis thought he knew came from Randy's fabricated records. Your actual operations never came up. Good work, Lewis. I owe you. No, we're even. This was the last time, Vincent. After tonight, I'm truly retired. Understood. And Lewis? Your family will always be under my protection. Anyone who threatens them will answer to me personally. Lewis smiled for the first time in days. Thanks, Vincent, but I think we can handle our own problems from now on. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 3 months later, Lewis Kane sat in his office at the main auto shop, reviewing quarterly reports that showed the best profits in his business's history. The publicity from Curtis Harrison's arrest had been uncomfortable, but it had also brought in customers who appreciated dealing with someone who'd stood up to corruption. Emma knocked on the office door and entered without waiting for permission, a habit she'd developed since returning from her aunt's house. Dad, there's someone here to see you. If it's another reporter, it's not a reporter. It's Detective Jody McMillan from Internal Affairs. Lewis looked up, immediately alert. Send her in. Detective McMillan was a tall, serious woman in her 40s with the kind of observant eyes that missed nothing. She sat down across from Lewis's desk and pulled out a notebook. Mr. Kane, I'm investigating the Harrison case. I need to ask you a few follow-up questions. Of course. Curtis Harrison's financial records show deposits totaling over $400,000 in the past 2 years. Money that can't be traced to his police salary or any legitimate source. Lewis nodded. Randy Warren was probably paying him for the fake evidence. That's what we assumed. But Warren claims he never paid Harrison directly. Says all his payments went to someone else, someone who coordinated the entire operation. Lewis felt a familiar tension in his shoulders. Someone else? Warren's claiming there was a third party involved, someone who approached him first about targeting you. Someone who knew enough about your past to make the whole scheme possible. Did Warren give you a name? Detective McMillan consulted her notes. Leonard Berg. You know him. Lewis kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing. Lenny Berg had been a low-level soldier for the Torino family, someone who'd run numbers and handled loan shark collections. Lewis had always considered him unreliable, too ambitious, and not smart enough to succeed in the organization. I knew him years ago. Small-time operator, nothing important. Warren says Berg approached him 18 months ago with information about your location and background. Says Berg was the one who suggested using your wife to gather intelligence. Lewis stood and walked to the window, thinking, if Lenny Berg was involved, this wasn't over. Lenny held grudges and had a reputation for making the same mistakes repeatedly. Detective, where is Leonard Berg now? That's the problem. He disappeared right after Harrison's arrest. Cleaned out his apartment, closed his bank accounts, vanished completely. And you think he might try something else? I think a man who went to this much trouble to set you up isn't going to just walk away because his first plan failed. Lewis turned back to Detective McMillan. What do you want from me? I want you to be careful. And I want you to call me immediately if Berg makes any contact with you or your family. After Detective McMillan left, Lewis sat alone in his office, considering his options. Leonard Berg represented the kind of loose end that Vincent had taught him never to ignore. Lenny was stupid enough to try again and connected enough to cause real damage. Lewis picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use again. Vincent? It's Lewis. We have another problem. An hour later, Lewis met Vincent at Rossetti's, the same restaurant where they discussed Curtis Harrison 3 months earlier. Vincent looked older, more tired, as if the stress of recent federal attention had taken its toll. Leonard Berg, Vincent said without preamble. I already heard. What do you know about him? He's been running a loan shark operation out of Cicero, thinks he's building his own organization. Word is he's been recruiting soldiers from other families, trying to position himself for when I retire. And he thought eliminating me would help with that. He thought discrediting you would discredit me. Lenny always was too stupid to understand subtlety. Louis sipped his wine, thinking, Vincent, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Ask, are you really retiring? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. I'm 73 years old, Louis. I've survived 40 years in this business by knowing when to fight and when to walk away. The federal heat is getting too intense, and I don't have the energy for another war. What happens to your territory when you step down? That depends on who's left standing when I do. Louis understood. Vincent was cleaning house, eliminating potential rivals and unreliable soldiers before turning over control to his chosen successor. Leonard Berg's move against Louis had marked him as both disloyal and dangerous. This is the last time, Vincent. After Lenny Berg, I'm done forever. I understand. And Louis, when this is finished, you and Emma will have my word that no one connected to my organization will ever bother you again. Louis nodded and stood to leave. How do you want to handle Berg? The same way you always handle problems, Louis. Quietly, professionally, and permanently. 2 days later, Leonard Berg's body was found in his car at the bottom of the Chicago River. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide. Despondent over financial problems and facing federal investigation, Berg had apparently driven his car off Lower Wacker Drive into the water. The case was closed within a week. Louis Kane returned to his quiet life, running auto shops, raising his daughter, and building legitimate success. Emma graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern and was accepted to medical school. She never asked about Leonard Berg's death, and Louis never volunteered information. Vincent Torino announced his retirement 6 months later, turning over his operations to a carefully chosen successor who had no interest in revisiting old grievances. The federal investigation into his organization quietly ended when prosecutors realized their key witnesses were either dead, in prison, or had provided false information. Curtis Harrison was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for corruption and civil rights violations. Maxine pled guilty to conspiracy charges and received 3 years probation in exchange for her cooperation. She moved to Arizona after the trial and never contacted Louis or Emma again. Randy Warren served 18 months in minimum security prison and entered witness protection upon his release, though he had little useful information to offer federal authorities. On a warm spring evening, Louis and Emma sat on their back porch, reviewing her medical school acceptance letters. Johns Hopkins or Northwestern? Emma asked. Your choice, sweetheart. I'm proud of you either way. Emma was quiet for a moment. Dad, do you ever regret the life you used to have? Louis considered the question. I regret the things that life cost me. I regret the person I had to become to survive it. But I don't regret leaving it behind to give you something better. And you don't regret what you had to do to protect us? No, Emma. I don't regret that at all. Emma smiled and squeezed her father's hand. Good, because I want you to know that whatever you were before I was born, you've been the best father anyone could ask for. Louis looked at his daughter, brilliant, strong, kind despite everything she'd witnessed, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Perfect peace. The monster that had awakened to protect his family had gone back to sleep, satisfied that the job was complete. Louis Kane was finally, truly free.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see